Here's what nobody tells you about age gaps in attraction. The moment you worry about being too old, you've already lost. Not because of your age, but because you've surrendered the very quality that makes you magnetic. I've watched countless men in their 40s, 50s, even 60s paralyze themselves with a single poisonous question. Am I too old for her? And in asking that question, they abandon the one advantage they've spent decades building. But here's what's fascinating, and this is backed by both evolutionary psychology and brutal social reality. The men who understand what I'm about to share don't just avoid looking desperate. They become categorically different from the younger men she's used to dismissing. This isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding a fundamental truth that most men never grasp. Attraction isn't democratic. Age isn't the disqualifier you think it is. Your uncertainty is. By the end of this, you'll understand the 3 psychological principles that separate men who inspire genuine interest from those who trigger protective distance. But first, we need to confront the lie you've been telling yourself. Let me tell you something that might sting. Every time you make a self-deprecating joke about your age, you're not being charming. You're broadcasting insecurity so loudly that it drowns out everything else about you. Women are exquisitely calibrated to detect confidence discrepancies. When you apologize for your age, her limbic system, the ancient part of her brain that evaluates safety and status, registers uncertainty. Not about your age, but about your self-assessment. You've essentially announced, I don't believe I have value. Why should she disagree? The Stoics understood something profound. You cannot control what others think, only what you project. Marcus Aurelius faced crises that would break modern men. Yet he maintained composure, not through delusion, but through accepting what he could not change while taking full responsibility for what he could. Your age, unchangeable. Your frame about it, entirely within your control. Here's the mechanism. Younger men often operate from a place of proving themselves. They're energetic but unformed, ambitious but unsteady. You have already been tested. When you own your age without defense or apology, you create a psychological contrast. You're not competing in their game. You're playing an entirely different one. And that difference is magnetic. The question isn't, am I too old? It's, do I carry myself like a man who has built something worth respecting? Now here's where most men make a catastrophic error. They try to compete on youth's terms. They start dressing younger, using slang that isn't theirs, adopting mannerisms that don't fit their history. This isn't confidence. It's cosplay. What you have that younger men don't, what you've earned through decades, is competence. Not just professional competence, but existential competence. You've navigated loss, built things, recovered from failures, developed taste. These aren't abstract qualities. They manifest in how you order at a restaurant, how you handle unexpected problems, how you move through the world without seeking constant validation. There's a reason why psychological research shows many women find older men attractive. It's not about money or status in the crude sense. It's about depth. You've read books she hasn't encountered. You've developed perspectives that come only from time. When you speak about something you genuinely understand, not to impress, but because you actually care about the subject, that authenticity creates what I call gravitational pull. The man who tries too hard announces he's outmatched. The man who is simply present, who engages without desperation, who can be genuinely interested without neediness, that man is rare at any age. At your age, with your experience, this should be easier, not harder. You're not trying to win her over through performance. You're inviting her to rise to your level of conversation, of depth, of presence. Here's the shift that changes everything. Stop performing. Start being present. Younger men are exhausting because they're constantly managing their image. They're calculating their next move, crafting their persona, performing what they think attraction requires. You don't have to do this anymore. Or rather, you shouldn't. When you're genuinely present, asking questions because you're actually curious, sharing stories because they're relevant, expressing opinions you actually hold, you create something increasingly rare: authenticity. The Stoics had a concept: preferred indifference. You can prefer an outcome without being attached to it. Yes, you're attracted to her. Yes, you'd prefer mutual interest. But you're complete without her validation. This isn't a technique. This is the result of genuine self-development. And paradoxically, this is when you become most attractive. She's not primarily evaluating whether you're too old. She's evaluating whether you're solid, whether you know who you are, whether your self-concept depends on her approval. The moment you need her to validate that you're not too old, you failed that test. The moment you're simply yourself, take it or leave it, you pass. This is the competence paradox. The more you've built in yourself, the less you need to prove. And the less you need to prove, the more magnetic you become. Now we need to address something uncomfortable. Many older men, in their nervousness about the age gap, inadvertently adopt a patronizing tone. They don't mean to, but it happens. And it's absolutely lethal to attraction. When you're anxious about something, in this case, the age difference, your brain often overcompensates. You might explain things she already knows, offer unsolicited advice, or adopt a protective stance she never asked for. Your intention might be generous, but the effect is condescending. You've unconsciously positioned yourself as the wise elder, rather than as an equal participant in a mutual exploration. Here's the principle. She's an adult. She has agency. She has intelligence. She has developed her own framework for understanding the world. Your age doesn't grant you the right to teach her unless she explicitly asks. Instead, approach with genuine curiosity about how she sees things. Her perspective, shaped by different generational experiences, different cultural moments, different challenges, it has value. Not because you're being politically correct, but because it actually does. The most successful cross-generational interactions I've witnessed share this quality. Both people treat each other as peers in consciousness, even if they're at different life stages. You're not her father figure unless she specifically seeks that. You're not her mentor unless that relationship is explicitly established. You're two adults with different experiences, exploring whether there's mutual interest. That's it. That's the frame. Anything else is your anxiety distorting the interaction. Here's an advantage you have that you might not be using. You've had decades to learn that you don't know everything. Younger men are still discovering this. Use it. One of the marks of genuine maturity is comfort with uncertainty. You don't need to have an opinion on everything. You don't need to dominate every conversation with your expertise. In fact, the ability to say, "I don't know much about that, tell me more," is profoundly attractive because it's so rare. It signals security. It signals that you're more interested in understanding than in being seen as knowledgeable. Research in interpersonal psychology shows that most people are terrible listeners. They're waiting for their turn to speak. You've presumably learned, through decades of relationships and conversations, how to actually listen. Not passive hearing, but active engagement. Asking follow-up questions that show you've tracked the conversation. Making connections she might not have articulated. Giving her the experience of being genuinely understood. This is powerful at any age gap, but especially so when she's used to young men who are primarily performing. When you listen well, when you reflect back understanding, when you engage with nuance, when you take her seriously, you're doing something else. You're giving her a mirror of her own depth. Many young women are surrounded by superficial interactions. The man who engages with substance, who treats her thoughts as worthy of genuine consideration, creates a space she doesn't want to leave. This is subtle but crucial. Respect means allowing her to make her own mistakes. Your life experience means you can often see where someone is heading before they get there. You can predict the painful lessons, the unnecessary detours, the predictable consequences. And there's a powerful temptation, especially with someone younger you care about, to intervene, to warn, to protect. Resist this unless explicitly asked. Epictetus taught that each person must walk their own path, learn their own lessons. Your wisdom isn't diminished by allowing her to discover truths herself. In fact, your wisdom should tell you that unsolicited advice, no matter how well-intentioned, rarely lands well. It triggers defensiveness, not gratitude. If she wants your perspective, she'll ask. If she doesn't ask, she's not ready to hear it. And forcing it will only create distance. Paradoxically, when you trust her to navigate her own life, when you don't try to control or correct or save, you become more attractive, not less. Because you're communicating something powerful. I see you as capable. I trust your judgment. I'm not here to fix you. For a woman used to men who either ignore her agency or try to manage it, this is extraordinary. The boundary is this: you're available, you're engaged, you're present, but you're not her project manager. And that distinction is everything. Let's confront the stereotype directly. The assumption that older means lower energy, less vitality, less engagement with life. For some men, this is true. For you, it doesn't have to be. Here's what the research shows. Energy isn't primarily about chronological age. It's about psychological engagement. Men who have purpose, who are building something, who maintain curiosity about the world, they maintain energy. Not the manic, scattered energy of youth, but focused, sustainable vitality. The question isn't, am I too old to keep up? It's, am I still genuinely engaged with my life? You don't need to match a 25-year-old's capacity for all-night parties. That's not the game. What you should offer is something different. The ability to be fully present in experiences, to extract meaning from moments, to engage deeply rather than just constantly. A well-chosen restaurant where the food is actually exceptional. A conversation that goes somewhere meaningful. An activity you genuinely enjoy rather than one you're performing. If you're exhausted by the thought of dating someone younger, if your life feels like an obligation you're trudging through, then the problem isn't the age gap. It's that you've let your fire dim. And that's addressable. Not through pretending to be younger, but through reigniting genuine engagement with your own existence. The Stoics would ask, are you living or merely existing? That's the question you need to answer first. Here's what you need to hear. If you want to be attractive to anyone, regardless of age, you need to be attractive to yourself first. Not in a narcissistic sense, but in the sense of living a life you genuinely value. You don't need to look 25, but you need to take care of the body you have. This isn't about vanity, it's about respect. Respect for yourself, which translates into how others perceive you. Can you move well? Do you have energy? Are you taking care of your health? These aren't superficial concerns, they're fundamental. The discipline you apply to your physical state signals discipline in other domains. Are you still learning? Still reading? Still exposing yourself to new ideas? Or have you calcified into your positions, stopped growing, decided you've learned enough? Intellectual stagnation is visible. It manifests in repetitive conversations, in closed-mindedness, in the absence of genuine curiosity. If you want to be interesting to a younger woman, you need to still be interested in the world. Here's the hard one. Have you done your psychological work? Have you addressed your resentments, your unprocessed pain, your accumulated bitterness? Because that weight is visible. It comes through in cynicism, in negative judgment, in the inability to be genuinely happy for others' joy. Younger people can sense emotional stagnation. They avoid it instinctively. Your emotional health isn't optional, it's fundamental. Finally, this. You're not trying to enter her world. You're inviting her into yours. And your world needs to be worth entering. What have you built? What do you care about? What brings you genuine joy? If the answer is, not much, or, I'm not sure anymore, then that's the work. Not to impress her, but because you deserve a life worth living. When your life has substance, when you have projects you care about, relationships you've nurtured, interests you've developed, then you're not desperate for her to fill a void. You're offering access to something that already exists. There's a concept in psychology called generativity, the concern for establishing and guiding the next generation. But it doesn't have to be parental. It can be about creating value, about building things that outlast you, about contributing something meaningful. When you're engaged in generative work, you radiate purpose. That's attractive at any age, to any age. The best relationships across any age gap are ones where both people make each other better. She brings fresh perspective, energy, different cultural touchstones. You bring depth, stability, hard-won wisdom. It's not transactional, it's collaborative. but that only works if you're bringing something genuine. Not money or status as substitutes for substance, but actual substance itself. The question becomes, if she enters your world, will she find something worth staying for? That's on you to build. So here's where you are. You now understand that age isn't your disqualifier. Your uncertainty about it is. You know that respect and presence matter more than performance. You've grasped that your vitality depends on your continued engagement with life itself. But knowledge without action is just intellectual entertainment. The question is, what will you do with this understanding? If this resonated with you, subscribe to Inside Her Psychology, because we're just getting started. There's a level of psychological sophistication you haven't accessed yet. The work begins now.